Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. I hope that you're all well and having a really great day so far. In today's video, I'm reviewing books that TikTok made me buy, but the question is, are they really worth all of the hype? This is a bit of a different video for me, but I've always loved reading. I've really gotten back into it lately and it's helping me to relax, disconnect from work. I'm sleeping so much better, and who doesn't love a good book? If you enjoy this video, then please let me know in the comments and by giving the video a like. If it's well received, I'd love to add some book content to my channel for you. So without further ado, grab yourself a drink, subscribe if you haven't already, and let's get into the books. The inspiration for me to read these books definitely came from BookTok and BookTube. These titles were mentioned in so many videos, it was really hard for me to ignore, and I wanted to see what all of the fuss was about. Two writers are definitely mentioned more than others, and that is Colleen Hoover and Jenkins Reid, so I think that is a good place for me to start. First up is Ugly Love, and this is the first Colleen Hoover book I've ever read. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I think I finished the whole thing in about 2 evenings, but I loved her writing style. I liked how fast-paced the book was and I just couldn't put it down. The story centres around Tate and Miles, and because of school, Tate goes to live with her brother. There she meets her brother's friend Miles, who just happens to live in the apartment across the hall. When the two of them meet, there is an instant attraction there, but Miles is very upfront about the fact that he doesn't want a relationship. He has two rules: never to ask him about his past and never to expect a future with him. Essentially, this is a friends with benefits situation, and Tate thinks she's okay with this because she's moved to that city for school, she has a job in a part-time hospital, and she doesn't think that she's got time to have a boyfriend anyway. Both Tate and Miles are storytellers in this book, but Tate is a storyteller in the present. Her meeting and all the interactions with Miles are purely from Tate's perspective. Miles is a storyteller about his past, which takes place 6 years previous. The book alternates between chapters from Tate and Miles, so as the book progresses you find out a lot more about Miles' story and some of the events that have happened to him which lead him to feel the way he does and act the way he does with Tate in the present day. Reading this book is like being on an emotional roller coaster. It is a romance between Tate and Miles, but at times it's absolutely heartbreaking. There's some really tragic circumstances in here, so as with any book, please make sure that you research the trigger warnings before reading it. But I do think that it lived up to the hype. I can absolutely understand why this book is so popular and getting so much attention. Next up is It Ends With Us, and this is another highly talked about Colleen Hoover book. After reading Ugly Love and enjoying it so much, I was definitely keen to read some more books from her. This book follows Lily, who moves to Boston from a small town in order to start her own business. In a chance meeting, she meets a neurosurgeon called Ryle, and there is an instant attraction between the two of them. As Lily starts to get closer to Ryle, she can't help but think back to her first love, Atlas, and the book jumps back and forth between present and past, and there you find much more about her relationship with Atlas. You should absolutely research the trigger warnings before reading this book because it does incorporate some very difficult topics. I'll try to explain my next point without spoiling the story, but if you've never been in a situation yourself, it can be very easy as an outsider looking in to think you know what you would do if you were in that situation. So for example, how easy it might be to walk away from a situation. What I think this book does really well is show this, and when Lily finds herself in a similar situation, it's not as straightforward as she would have thought. It's a lot more complex and she has very conflicted feelings. I believe this was a very personal book for Colleen Hoover to write, and in some situations she's drawn upon her own real life experiences, but reading this I did feel real empathy for Lily. I'd absolutely recommend this book, and I completely understand why it's getting so much attention right now. I've gone on to buy another 6 Colleen Hoover books because I enjoyed these so much and I just can't wait to read them. Next up is The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Jenkins Reid, and arguably this is one of the most spoken about books on BookTok and BookTube, and for good reason. This was the easiest 5 stars that I've ever given. The book centres around Evelyn, who is an A-list Hollywood actress. She's just approaching her 80th birthday and she decides to hire a relatively unknown journalist, Monique, to help her write her memoir. The book jumps between present day and the past as Evelyn is explaining her life story to Monique, and I really love that about this book. As the title suggests, Evelyn has had 7 husbands and each of them get their own chapter in the book. But although there's various reasons for each of her marriages, she's only actually had one true love. Evelyn's not what you would call a nice person, and she knows that, but she's certainly a very interesting character. She always does whatever is best to further her own agenda, and that's often at the expense of other people. But at a certain point, she does try and make up for that in her own way. My favourite character in this book by far is Harry Cameron. I think that he is a very easy character to love. One thing that I think really adds depth to this book is the time period that it's set in. The beliefs of society in the 50s, 60s, 70s and 80s are very different to what they are today, and this does add a lot of challenges for our characters to face. This could be anything from the role of a wife, women in business, divorce, same-sex relationships. All of these things were viewed very differently back in that time period, and it absolutely influenced some of the decisions made by the characters. When I was reading this, I couldn't help but feel sad. If this book was set in present day, I'm sure these characters would have had very different lives and been so much happier, but that wouldn't have made for such an interesting book, would it? A fantastic story. I've got no hesitation in recommending The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo to anybody. I'm sure this will be a favourite of mine for a long time to come, but again, don't forget to research trigger warnings before you read it. Next up is Malibu Rising, and this was the second book that I read by Taylor Jenkins Reid. The story centres around the family of Mick Reaver, who was actually one of Evelyn Hugo's 7 husbands, but he's not a major character in that book. Mick Reaver is a huge international rock star, and I imagine him to have like a Bruce Springsteen level of fame. The book mainly focuses on his children, 4 siblings, their relationship with each other, and also their relationship with Mick as their father. The book jumps between present and past, and I can see that this is a running theme in the books that I really enjoy. In the past, you see the meeting and courtship of Mick and their mum, and leading into the childhoods of the children. And as the book progresses, you find out more and more about what led to their relationships being what they are in the present day. I don't think that Malibu Rising was on the same level as The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo or the next one that I'm going to speak about, but it was really enjoyable nonetheless, and a solid 4 stars from me. Next up is Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid, and I think when people are speaking about Taylor Jenkins Reid on booktube and BookTok, it's often this book and The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo that are most spoken about. Both are a solid 5 star in my opinion. The format of this book is very different from anything that I've read before, and it reads very much like a script. Essentially, a journalist is writing a piece on Daisy Jones and the Six, who were a very successful rock band. She interviews the 7 members of the band, their friends, their partners, colleagues, anybody who was sort of in their inner circle at the time, and it covers the formation of the band, the rise to fame, the years sort of when they were right at the top, and then leading to the split of the band as well. I listened to the audiobook while I was reading this, and I would absolutely recommend that you do the same. It was like no other audiobook that I've ever listened to. It seems like each of the characters were played by a different person on the audiobook, and I think that it really took the experience to a different level. It felt like you were watching or listening to a documentary rather than reading a piece of fiction. It really sort of added another level to the experience. The feel of it is like the interviews have been edited and put into time order, so you are seeing the events sort of play out from various people's perspectives. And what's interesting about that is you see different points of view, but sometimes people remember things quite differently, which is how it is in real life as well. I'm a huge rock fan myself, so this story was right up my street. The book gives you all of the drama that you would expect from a rock band, from power struggles within the band, resentments building up, addictions, relationships within the band, relationships with people outside of the band and their influences. All of these things add up to really good content within the book. This book is like no other that I've ever read. I wouldn't hesitate to recommend it to anybody, and I completely understand all of the hype around it. Next up is The Hating Game by Sally Thorne, and whenever I hear people on BookTok or BookTube talk about enemies to lovers or grumpy sunshine, this book is very often mentioned. I think it's so popular that it's actually been made into a movie and Lucy Hale is going to play the female lead. The story centres around Lucy and Joshua, who are workplace rivals. They both do the same job, but they were forced together a few years previous when the companies that they work for merged together. Two different ways of doing things, two different cultures, and there's been tension between them ever since. The opportunity for promotion arrives and neither one of them can stand the thought of the other becoming their boss. So as a result, the rivalry is taken up a gear, especially in the lead up to the interviews for this new job. Both Lucy and Joshua are very likeable. I enjoyed the writing style and I would describe this book as easy reading. By that I mean the story is very predictable. You can see exactly where it's going from very early on, but that's not always a bad thing. I thought about one of my friends when I was reading this because she would absolutely love this book. She may have already read it. But what she wants from a good book is a nice wholesome romance. Nothing heavy or tragic that's going to play on her mind after, and this is exactly what The Hating Game is. If that type of book is your preference, or maybe you're looking for something light-hearted to read after finishing something with heavier topics in it, then this one is definitely worth a read. Next up is The Love Hypothisis by Ali Hazelwood, and this is another very popular book on BookTube and BookTok. I often hear people mentioning this when speaking about grumpy sunshine and fake dating tropes. I think that this started out as fan fiction talking about the romance between Rey and Kylo Ren in Star Wars, and you can see from, the artwork here where that influence has come from. The story centres around Adam and Olive in an academic romance set in Stanford University. Olive is a PhD student and Adam is part of the faculty. Adam is extremely grumpy and he certainly has a reputation for being a real hard ass. He's brilliant and very advanced in his career for somebody of his age, but he's not really well liked by the student population at the university. Olive's friend wants to date her ex-boyfriend, and although Olive is not bothered about this in the slightest and has given her friend the green light, I think her best friend is really frightened to do anything about it in case it hurts Olive's feelings. In an effort to try and convince her friend that she's fine with this situation and that she's moved on, she randomly kisses a guy in a bar knowing that a friend will see this. Literally just grabs the person next to her, panics and plants one on him, and of course it's Adam Carson. Olive's absolutely mortified that she's kissed a member of staff. She assumed that he'd be a student like her. She doesn't know Adam at all, but she's very aware of his grumpy reputation, and obviously she has to explain herself to him. But she's very much surprised when Adam agrees to help her out by fake dating and, to go along with this story for her friend. Through the course of their fake dating, they get to know each other, and I'm not going to lie, there are some really cringy situations in here where they have to keep up appearances. I'm thinking about one situation in particular, but it's a very light-hearted and fun read. Both Olive and Adam are very likeable characters, as are the sub-characters in this book. You're not going to go into a really in-depth, deep relationship where they get to know each other and their personality, but if you just want something light-hearted and fun, then this book is a really nice read. It does touch on the subject of sexual harassment, especially around the workplace, so that's something to be mindful of, but overall I thought that it was a nice story, and if you enjoy grumpy sunshine and fake dating tropes, then this one is for you. And lastly, I have You and Me on Vacation by Emily Henry. Weirdly, I think this is called People We Meet on Vacation in the US, so I'm not sure why the title is different in the two different countries. For me, this book was okay, but I don't think it lived up to the hype or the expectation that I had for it based on listening to other people's reviews. It was still a nice story though, another easy read, and maybe this would be another book that my friend would enjoy. This is a friends to lovers romance between the two main characters, Poppy and Alex. I think they became friends when they were at college and they're now in their mid-30s, so we're talking about more than a decade's worth of friendship. They go on vacation every year and that is funded by Poppy's job as a travel writer/blogger. At some point something happens between them, and when you start reading the book they haven't been in contact for 2 years, but Poppy is really keen to rekindle their friendship, so she reaches out to Alex and invites him on a vacation. Again, the chapters in this book jump between present and past, but you don't find out until much later in the book what happened to make them stop speaking in the first place. In my opinion, this book was very predictable, but it's still a nice story and I'd rate this a solid 3.5 stars. I know a lot of people when reviewing this book did say that they preferred Beach Read, which is Emily Henry's other book. I do have that one in my collection and I haven't read it yet, so hopefully I'll enjoy that one a little bit more. But that's everything for today's video, guys. I'll link all of the books that I've spoken about in the description box below, just in case you're interested in any of them. I really hope that you enjoyed today's video. If you did, please let me know by giving the video a like. And if you would like to see more videos from me, hit the subscribe button and the notification bell because I'd love to have you back. Thank you so much for watching and I'll see you on my next one. Enjoy the rest of your day.